The excavator's steel teeth bit into the asphalt at 3 a.m., its diesel engine roaring through the darkness like a mechanical beast. Marcus Chen stood in the shadows, watching 20 years of city planning crumble beneath his feet. Tomorrow, the parking enforcement officer who'd destroyed his life would arrive to write another ticket, only to discover that the street she'd weaponized against him no longer existed. The concrete dust, settling in the night air, tasted like victory. But Marcus knew the real war was just the yellow envelope, fluttered against Marcus Chen's windshield like a dying butterfly, its adhesive strip already peeling in the morning heat. He didn't need to read it to know what it contained: another parking violation. Another $75 extracted from his dwindling bank account. Another twist of the knife that had been slowly bleeding him dry for the past 8 months. Marcus sat in his 10-year-old Honda engine, still ticking as it cooled, and stared at the citation through the glass. His hands trembled slightly as he reached for it, not from fear, but from the kind of rage that had been building pressure. Like steam in a boiler, the paper crinkled between his fingers as he unfolded it, revealing the familiar bureaucratic language that had become the soundtrack to his financial ruin. Violation: parking in excess of 2-hour limit. Fine, $75. Officer D. Winters. Officer D. Winters. The name had haunted his dreams for months now. Attached to every citation, every appeal denial, every crushing blow to his small business and his family's stability. Marcus had never seen the face behind the name, but he'd memorized every harsh stroke of the pen, every impersonal checkmark that had systematically destroyed his life. The irony wasn't lost on him that this particular ticket had been issued while he was inside the building directly behind his parked car. His own building, where he'd operated Chun's electronics repair for 7 years. The same building where he'd invested every penny of his savings. Where he'd proposed to his wife Sarah in the cramped back office. Where he'd dreamed of expanding into the vacant storefront next door. Those dreams felt like someone else's life now. Marcus crumpled the citation and threw it onto the passenger seat, where it joined a growing pile of identical yellow envelopes. 43 tickets in 8 months. Over $3,000 in fines. Money that should have gone to his daughter's college fund, to his wife's medical bills, to keeping his business afloat in an economy that seemed determined to crush small entrepreneurs like him. The bell above his shop door chimed as he entered, the sound hollow in the empty space. Sarah looked up from behind the counter, her face immediately registering the familiar expression of defeat that had become his default setting. She was beautiful still, even after 15 years of marriage, even with the stress lines that had appeared around her eyes, even with the way her shoulders had begun to curve inward as if she were trying to protect herself from the next blow. "Another one?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. Marcus nodded, unable to trust his voice. He walked to the counter where Sarah had been sorting through a stack of bills, organizing them by urgency, a grim accounting system they'd developed to determine which creditors could wait another week and which ones couldn't. "We can't keep this up," Sarah said quietly, her fingers tracing the edge of a past due notice from their health insurance company. "Marcus, we're drowning." "I know." The words came out harsher than he'd intended, and he saw Sarah flinch. "I'm sorry, I know, but what choice do I have? I can't run the business from home. I can't serve customers without a storefront, and I can't afford to rent parking somewhere else, not when our building's lease specifically includes parking rights." For the space directly in front, Sarah's laugh was bitter. "Rights? What a joke. Try explaining our rights to Officer Winters." Marcus had tried. God, how he'd tried. He'd attended 3 city council meetings, presenting his case with charts and photographs and a carefully prepared speech about small business rights and selective enforcement. He'd filed formal complaints, submitted appeals, even hired a lawyer they couldn't afford for a consultation that yielded nothing but a bill and the advice to try to work something out. The city's response had been uniform and infuriating. The parking regulations were clearly posted, applied equally to all citizens, and Officer Winters was simply doing her job. The fact that Marcus's business had operated successfully for 7 years without a single parking issue seemed irrelevant to everyone except Marcus himself. "There has to be something," Sarah said, but her voice lacked conviction. They'd had this conversation dozens of times, each repetition more desperate than the last. "Maybe we could talk to the other business owners, form some kind of coalition, The other business owners don't get tickets, Marcus interrupted. Have you noticed that Chen's Electronics is the only business on this entire block that seems to attract Officer Winter's attention? Mrs. Rodriguez at the bakery parks in the same spot every day, no tickets. The law firm's partners leave their BMWs out there for hours, no tickets. But God forbid I park in front of my own building for more than 2 hours. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, her fingers still moving through the bills. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. Marcus, what if we're wrong? What if it's not personal? What if it's personal? Marcus's voice was flat, certain. I don't know why, but it's personal, and I'm done pretending otherwise. The bell chimed again, and Marcus looked up to see his neighbor, Frank Delacroix, entering the shop. Frank owned the auto repair garage 2 blocks down, and he'd been one of the few business owners who'd supported Marcus's fight against the parking enforcement. Marcus, Sarah, Frank nodded to both of them, his weathered face grim. I've got news, and you're not going to like it. Marcus felt his stomach drop. In the past 8 months, he'd learned to recognize the expression on Frank's face, the look of someone who was about to deliver another crushing blow to a man who is already down. What is it? Frank pulled out his phone and showed Marcus a photograph. It was a picture of Marcus's car, parked in front of his shop, but the timestamp showed it was taken at 11:47 p.m. the previous night. Officer Winters was here last night, Frank said. I saw her patrol car myself. She was taking pictures of your car, measuring distances, writing notes in some kind of logbook. At midnight, Marcus Chu was documenting your car being parked here at midnight. Sarah's face went white. But the 2-hour limit only applies during business hours, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. It says so right on the sign. That's what I thought too, Frank said grimly. But I did some checking this morning. Turns out there's a subsection in the city code that allows parking enforcement officers to document habitual violations at any time of day or night. If they can prove a pattern of extended parking, they can recommend additional penalties. Marcus felt the familiar pressure building in his chest, the sensation of walls closing in from all sides. What kind of additional penalties? Towing authorization, impoundment fees? And here's the kicker. They can recommend that the city revoke parking privileges for repeat offenders permanently. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Without parking access, his business would die. He couldn't expect customers to walk 3 blocks from the nearest public lot, especially elderly clients who brought in heavy electronics for repair. The location had been everything convenient, visible, accessible. Take away the parking, and Chun's Electronics would become just another failed small business, another casualty of bureaucratic warfare. When? Marcus asked, his voice barely audible. The hearing is scheduled for next Friday, 1 week from today. If they rule against you, you'll have 48 hours to remove your vehicle permanently from this block, or they'll impound it and fine you an additional $500. Sarah made a sound that might have been a sob or a laugh. It was hard to tell which. Marcus reached for her hand, but she pulled away, shaking her head. I can't do this anymore, she said, her voice breaking. I can't watch them destroy us, piece by piece. I can't pretend that fighting this is worth losing everything we've built. Sarah, no. She stood up, her movements sharp and decisive. I'm done, Marcus. I'm done watching you tilt at windmills while our life falls apart. I'm done choosing between groceries and rent because you won't admit defeat. I'm done pretending that your pride is worth more than our daughter's future. She walked to the back of the shop, where she kept her purse in a locked drawer. Marcus watched her go, knowing that something fundamental had just shifted between them, something that might never be repaired. Frank cleared his throat uncomfortably. Marcus, I'm sorry. I know this is hard, but maybe Sarah's right. Maybe it's time to cut your losses and find another location. Marcus looked around his shop at the workbench, where he'd repaired thousands of devices, at the framed photo of his first satisfied customer. At the corner where he'd taught his daughter Emma how to solder when she was 8 years old, every surface held memories. Every tool represented years of careful investment and patient growth. This is my place, he said quietly. This is where I belong. Frank nodded slowly. I understand, but sometimes belonging isn't enough. Sometimes you have to know when to walk away. After Frank left, Marcus sat alone in his shop, listening to the family. The first bite of the excavator's steel teeth into the asphalt sounded like the world cracking open. Marcus stood in the circle of portable LED floodlights, watching 20 years of city planning disappear beneath Frank's expert hands. 2:47 a.m., and the street that had been his battlefield for 8 months was about to become his victory. "You sure about this?" Frank called down from the excavator's cab, his voice barely audible over the diesel engine. "Once we start digging, there's no going back." Marcus looked at the property survey in his hands, at the legal boundaries that proved this land belonged to him, at the painted parking lines that had cost him $3,000 and nearly his marriage. "I'm sure." The excavator's arm swung down again, and another chunk of asphalt crumbled away. Marcus felt a surge of satisfaction so intense it was almost frightening. For 8 months, he'd been the victim, the small business owner crushed beneath the weight of bureaucratic indifference. Tonight, he was taking control. Sarah emerged from the shop carrying a thermos of coffee and a folder thick with documents. She'd spent the previous day at the county clerk's office, pulling every piece of paperwork that supported their legal claim to the disputed property. Her face was set with determination, but Marcus could see the nervousness in her eyes. "The permits?" he asked. "Filed electronically at midnight," she said, handing him the folder. "Emergency construction permit for structural repairs on private property. Completely legal, as long as we're not connecting to city utilities or blocking public access." Marcus smiled. Sarah had always been brilliant with details, with finding the loopholes and technicalities that could make impossible things possible. "And the surveyor, Tommy Nguyen, will be here at 6 a.m. to officially mark the property lines. He's bringing his equipment and a notarized copy of the original deed. If anyone questions our boundaries, we'll have legal documentation on site." Frank shut down the excavator and climbed down from the cab. "Foundation's ready," he announced, wiping his hands on a rag, "but we need to move fast. This much noise, even at this hour, someone's going to notice." As if summoned by his words, a light came on in the apartment building across the street. Marcus watched as a figure appeared at the window, peering down at the construction site. He waved casually, as if middle-of-the-night demolition was perfectly normal. "Mrs. Patterson," Sarah said, recognizing their neighbor. "She's probably calling the police right now." "Let her," Marcus said. "We're not breaking any laws. This is our property, and we have the right to improve it." The concrete mixer rumbled to life, its rotating drum catching the light from the floodlights. Marcus had never appreciated how beautiful industrial equipment could be, how purposeful and decisive. Every machine, every tool, every calculated movement was part of his declaration of independence from the system that had tried to destroy him. Frank's crew worked with military precision. They'd done this before emergency repairs on businesses rushed jobs for clients who couldn't afford downtime. But this was different. This wasn't just construction. It was warfare conducted with concrete and steel. "Foundation's going in," Frank announced, positioning the concrete mixers. "Shoot. Once this sets, we're committed. No city inspector is going to let us tear out a poured foundation." Marcus nodded, watching the gray concrete flow into the excavated space. Each cubic foot represented another nail in the coffin of Officer D. Winters campaigned against him. By morning, the parking space that had been her weapon would be his fortress. The work continued through the night, a carefully choreographed dance of construction vehicles and skilled workers. Marcus found himself thinking about his parents, about the stories they'd told him of building something from nothing, of creating opportunity through sheer determination. They would have understood this moment, this refusal to accept defeat. At 4:30 a.m., just as the eastern sky began to lighten, Marcus heard the sound he'd been dreading: sirens. 2 police cruisers rounded the corner, their red and blue lights painting the construction site in alternating colors. Marcus felt his stomach drop, but he forced himself to remain calm. "Remember," Sarah said quietly, "we're not doing anything illegal. We have documentation. We have permits. We have the right to be here." The police officers approached cautiously, their hands resting on their equipment belts. Marcus recognized one of them, Officer Rodriguez, who had responded to a break-in at his shop 2 years earlier. A decent man, fair and professional. "Mr. Chen," Rodriguez said, "we got a noise complaint. What's going on here?" Marcus handed him the folder Sarah had prepared: emergency construction repairs on private property. "We've got permits. property. Surveys everything you need to see. Rodriguez examined the documents with a flashlight, his partner taking photos of the construction site. Marcus watched their faces, looking for any sign of skepticism or suspicion. "This is unusual," Rodriguez said finally. "Middle-of-the-night construction. You mind explaining the emergency?" Sarah stepped forward. "We're scheduled for a city hearing next Friday regarding parking violations. If we lose access to our property. This construction establishes our legal claim before the hearing." Rodriguez's partner, whose nameplate read Johnson, looked confused. "You're building a garage to avoid parking tickets?" "We're building a garage on our own property," Marcus corrected, "property that the city has been treating as public parking space for years." "We're just correcting the record." Rodriguez looked at the documents again, then at the construction site, then back at Marcus. "Mr. Chen, I'm going to level with you. This looks legal, but it's going to create problems. Big problems. The city doesn't like surprises. The city doesn't like competition," Marcus replied. "For 8 months, they've been using parking enforcement to drive me out of business. I'm not going anywhere." Rodriguez closed the folder and handed it back to Sarah. "We can't stop you from working on your own property, but I strongly recommend you contact the city planning department first thing Monday morning. Get ahead of this before it becomes a bigger issue." After the police left, Marcus felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. They'd passed the first test, but he knew the real challenges were still ahead. The city would respond, and when they did, it would be with everything they had. "Phase 2, Frank announced, directing his crew to begin assembling the steel frame. "We need walls up before the sun comes up. Once people start seeing what we're building, the phone calls are going to start." Marcus watched the skeletal structure of his garage take shape against the dawn sky. It was beautiful in its simplicity for walls, a roof, and a door, the most expensive parking space in the city, and the most legally bulletproof garage in the state. At 6:15 a.m., Tommy Nguyen arrived with his surveying equipment. He was a thin, methodical man who'd been working property boundaries for 30 years. Marcus had hired him specifically because of his reputation for accuracy and his willingness to defend his measurements in court. "This is going to be interesting," Tommy said, setting up his transit. "I've surveyed this block before, but never with this level of precision. You sure you want to open this can of worms?" "The can's already open," Marcus replied. "I'm just making sure everyone can see what's inside." Tommy's survey confirmed what Marcus had suspected. The city's parking spaces encroached on his property by nearly 6 feet. The painted lines that had justified 43 tickets were painted on land that legally belonged to him. "Jesus," Tommy muttered, checking his measurements for the 3rd time. "You could probably sue the city for property theft. This is a clear case of adverse possession in reverse." Marcus filed that information away for later. Right now, his focus was on the garage, on the physical reality that would make legal arguments unnecessary. By 7 a.m., the walls were up and the roof was being installed. By 8 a.m., Marcus Chen owned the most beautiful garage in the city. Frank's crew packed up their equipment with the efficiency of a military unit. They'd worked through the night, transforming a public parking space into a private structure in less than 6 hours. As they loaded the last of the tools, Frank approached. Marcus, with a satisfied grin. "That's the fastest garage I've ever built," he said, "and probably the most important. You know what's going to happen next, right?" Marcus looked at his new garage, at the solid walls that now occupied the space where Officer D. Winters had expected to find his car. "They're going to lose their minds, that's putting it mildly. The city's going to throw everything they have at you. Inspectors, lawyers, politicians, they're going to try to tear this down and make an example of you." "Let them try," Marcus said. "I've got documentation, I've got legal standing, and I've got the best foundation Frank Delacroix ever poured." Frank laughed, clapping Marcus on the shoulder. "You're all right, Marcus? Crazy as hell, but all right. Call me when you need the next favor." As the construction crew departed, Marcus stood alone in front of his new garage. The morning rush hour was beginning, and he could see people slowing down to stare at the structure that hadn't existed 12 hours earlier. Some looked confused, others impressed. A few took pictures with their phones. Sarah joined him, carrying 2 cups of coffee and looking exhausted but triumphant. "The city planning department opens in an hour," she said. How long do you think it'll take them to figure out what happened? The meeting was scheduled for 2 p.m. in the city council chambers. But by 1:30, Marcus could see that something had changed. Robert Harrison sat at the negotiating table with 3 other attorneys, their expensive briefcases arranged like artillery pieces across from them. City Councilwoman Patricia Reeves shuffled through a stack of documents with the expression of someone who'd discovered a rattlesnake in her desk drawer. Marcus and Sarah took their seats at the smaller table designated for interested parties, which felt like a polite way of saying, people about to be crushed by municipal machinery. The garage had given them leverage, but sitting in this room, surrounded by the full weight of city government, Marcus wondered if he'd brought a knife to a gunfight. Before we begin, Harrison said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to controlling rooms, I want to make something clear. The city is prepared to negotiate in good faith, but we will not be held hostage by illegal construction or extortionist tactics. Marcus felt his temper flare. Extortion. I built a garage on my own property. You built a structure overnight. To circumvent established procedures and create a fait accompli, one of Harrison's colleagues interjected. That's not negotiation, it's manipulation. Sarah leaned forward, her voice steady despite the intimidating surroundings. What's manipulation is issuing 43 parking tickets on private property, while ignoring identical violations by other businesses. What's manipulation is midnight surveillance and selective enforcement designed to drive a small business owner into bankruptcy. Councilwoman Reeves looked up from her documents. Ms. Chen, these are serious allegations. Do you have evidence to support them? Sarah slid a thick binder across the table. Photographic evidence, timestamp documentation, witness statements, and a complete record of parking enforcement on this block for the past year. The pattern speaks for itself. Harrison opened the binder, his expression shifting from confident to concerned as he examined the contents. Marcus watched the lawyer's face, noting the subtle changes that indicated someone reassessing their position. Where did you get this? Harrison asked, holding up a photograph of Officer Winters taking pictures at midnight. Our neighbor, Frank Delacroix, has security cameras facing the street, Sarah replied. When we started documenting the harassment, he gave us access to his footage. Marcus had to admire Sarah's preparation. While he'd been focused on the dramatic gesture of building the garage, she'd been quietly assembling a legal case that could destroy the city's position. The garage had been his weapon. This documentation was hers. Harrison conferred quietly with his colleagues, their voices too low to hear, but their body language increasingly tense. Finally, he closed the binder and looked directly at Marcus. Mr. Chen, we're prepared to offer a settlement. The city will refund 50% of the parking fines and guarantee that future. Enforcement on your block will be conducted according to standard procedures. In exchange, you agree to remove the garage and return the space to its previous condition. Marcus felt Sarah's hand touch his arm, a warning to stay calm, to think before responding, but the offer felt like another insult, another attempt to make him accept partial justice while allowing the city to save face. 50%, Marcus said. You illegally issued tickets on my private property for 8 months, nearly destroyed my business, caused enormous stress to my family, and you want to keep half the money you stole? The city disputes your characterization of these events, Harrison replied. Our offer represents a reasonable compromise that acknowledges certain irregularities while avoiding costly litigation. Here's my counteroffer, Marcus said, surprising himself with the steel in his voice. The city refunds 100% of all fines, plus interest and damages. Officer Winters is reassigned or terminated, and the city formally acknowledges that it has been issuing tickets on private property without legal authority. The room went silent. Marcus could feel the weight of everyone's attention, the recognition that he'd just declared war on the municipal government. But he was tired of compromising, tired of accepting partial solutions to complete injustices. Harrison started to respond, but Councilwoman Reeves held up her hand. Mr. Harrison, I'd like a moment to review these documents. She opened Sarah's binder and began reading, her expression growing more troubled with each page. Marcus watched Reeves examine the evidence, noting the way her face changed as she absorbed the scope of the harassment. She was a politician, which meant she understood the potential for scandal better than the lawyers did. A systematic campaign of enforcement. Targeting a single business owner was the kind of story that could destroy careers and trigger federal investigations. Mr. Harrison Reeves said finally, "I think we need to discuss this situation more carefully. Perhaps we should reassess for 30 minutes while the city reviews all available information." Harrison looked like he wanted to object, but Reeves was already standing. 30 minutes, she announced, and the city officials filed out of the room like soldiers retreating from a battlefield. Alone with Sarah, Marcus felt the adrenaline that had carried him through the confrontation begin to fade. "Think we pushed too hard?" he asked. "I think we pushed exactly hard enough," Sarah replied. "Did you see Reeves' face when she read about the midnight surveillance? She knows this is bigger than parking tickets now." Marcus nodded, but he couldn't shake the feeling that they were still missing something important. The pattern of harassment had been too focused, too personal to be explained by simple bureaucratic incompetence. Someone had targeted him specifically, and until he understood why, the threat would remain. His phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number. "Enjoying your moment in the spotlight, Mr. Chen." "Don't get too comfortable," Marcus showed the message to Sarah, who immediately pulled out her own phone. "I'm calling the police. This is harassment, possibly stalking. We need to document this." But before Sarah could dial, the conference room door opened and Councilwoman Reeves returned alone. Her expression was grim, and she carried a manila folder that hadn't been there before. "Mr. Chen, Ms. Chen, I need to share something with you, something that changes the nature of this entire situation." She sat down across from them, the folder unopened on the table between them. "What I'm about to tell you is confidential, but I believe you have a right to know." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. "What is it?" Reeves opened the folder and pulled out a photograph. It showed a younger Marcus standing next to a woman in a police uniform, both of them smiling at what appeared to be some kind of community event. Marcus stared at the photo, recognition dawning slowly. "Do you remember this?" Reeves asked. Marcus picked up the photograph, his mind racing back through years of community involvement, business events, civic functions, and then it clicked, the Downtown Business Association's annual barbecue 3 years ago. He'd been serving on the Merchants Committee, working to improve relations between local businesses and city services. "I remember the event," Marcus said slowly, "but I don't remember her." "Her name is Detective Diana Winters," Reeves said. "She was Officer Diana Winters then, working community relations. According to her personnel file, she received a commendation that year for her work with local business owners." Sarah leaned forward. "Wait, detective. I thought she was a parking enforcement officer." "She was reassigned to parking enforcement 8 months ago," Reeves said. "Right around the time your tickets started." Marcus felt the pieces of a puzzle clicking into place, forming a picture he didn't want to see. Why was she reassigned? Reeves pulled out another document, this one heavily redacted. There was an incident, an allegation of inappropriate conduct with a business owner. The investigation was inconclusive, but she was moved to a position with less direct public contact. The room seemed to spin around Marcus's. The systematic harassment, the personal vendetta, the midnight surveillance, it all made terrible sense. "Now she thinks I reported her." "The complaint was filed anonymously," Reeves said, "but the timing suggests it came from someone she'd worked with during community relations, someone who attended the same events, participated in the same programs." Sarah was reading over Marcus's shoulder, her voice tight with anger. "So she's been destroying our lives because she thinks Marcus got her demoted." "We don't know that for certain," Reeves said carefully, "but the correlation is ... concerning. The city is conducting an internal investigation, but these things take time." Marcus stood up abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked the parking lot where his Honda sat next to Sarah's car. 8 months of torture, $3,000 in fines, his marriage nearly destroyed, his business on the verge of collapse, all because a police officer had decided he was responsible for a complaint he'd never filed. "Mr. Chen," Reeves said, "I understand this is upsetting, but I want you to know that the city takes this situation very seriously. If Officer Winters has been using her position to pursue a personal vendetta, she will face disciplinary action." Marcus turned back to face her, his voice deadly quiet. "Disciplinary action. She's been stalking my family. She's been destroying my business. She sent me threatening text messages this morning, and you want to give her a reprimand. The investigation is ongoing. The investigation is bullshit, M.